Hello, how are you? Whatever time zone you're in, good evening, good day, good afternoon, good morning, good grief, it's us back again, episode 168. I'm Peter Stewart, welcome to Livestream Insiders. Today on the show on the way, while you're watching, ponder this. Why is no one watching Facebook Watch? Plus, the growing trend of senior citizens going live and top tips for broadcasters from around the world when they're going live. What do you think people should be considering? I'm Peter Stewart. I'm the author of the Live Streaming Handbook, and I'm here with my colleague and co-presenter, Krishna Day.
Thanks everybody for joining us for Livestream Insiders. We will do our best to watch out for your comments if you're here live, or in fact, if you are watching on a replay. You can also get access to the show on Vimeo, on YouTube, and also if you prefer it as a podcast, you'll be able to find it as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. I'm really looking forward to some tips that are being shared today, but I'm particularly interested in a couple of tools I was looking at, and I'm going to be sharing about them a bit later on, particularly in terms of making our live streams more accessible. Really, Peter and I are here just to give you some ideas, resources, and case studies. We love case studies to actually encourage you to integrate live streaming into your communications. So I'm going to pass it back over to Peter for the first story, and I'll be back a little later on.
Absolutely, Krishna. Thank you very much indeed for that. So, why is nobody watching Facebook Watch? A year and a half in, Facebook Watch, which was supposed to have been the company's kind of YouTube killer, is a jumble of adverts. They don't have any hit shows and only a tiny percentage of the overall video revenue. It doesn't seem to be going well. It does seem to be going a little bit south. It's not quite working out for Zuck, is it, when it comes to Facebook Watch, like he should worry, ka-ching anyway. So those stats, 45 minutes a day is the length of time that an average user is watching Facebook Watch. Seems quite a lot, doesn't it? Not when you consider some of the other stats that go alongside it in the same bucket. 45 minutes a day, but no more than 90 seconds at a time, which is a little bit odd, isn't it? 90 seconds, is that all? Doesn't sound as though there's much to be actually watching and to consume and actually get involved with. It's probably people just kind of swiping through, isn't it? And seeing what's there, doing a little bit of grazing video-wise. 75 million people a day use Facebook Watch. Sounds a big number. Not when you consider that Facebook itself overall has 1.5 billion users a day. And it's certainly costing them, isn't it? $1 billion last year to buy shows for Facebook Watch, to try and lure people away from YouTube and Netflix and Prime and Hulu and the terrestrial channels as well. But it's certainly not produced a hit show in all of that time for all of that money. So, advertising, let's take a look at that. So, there is certainly stiff competition, and it gets half as many people when they looked at the number of people who are actually aware of Facebook Watch. Well, half people hadn't heard of it at all, and 3/4 of them hadn't even used it. So it's not going very well at all. And what about those stats about the number of seconds that people are actually watching Facebook Watch that I mentioned a few minutes ago? 45 minutes a day, 90 seconds at a time. One of those cheeky little sets of algorithms, which actually means that videos play automatically, which is a little bit of the massaging of these statistics. And also those adverts that I mentioned a few moments ago, there's banner adverts which are underneath the video as it plays, and also there are pre-roll adverts as well. It's not conducive to a fantastic user experience at all. So We don't know what is going to be happening to Facebook Watch, but it may just be decided in the great HQ that is Facebook. Perhaps it's something that's not working terribly well, and maybe, just maybe, they will pull the plug. Save throwing good money after bad. What do you reckon? Love to hear your thoughts. You can put those in the comments section, and we'll get to those a little bit later on. And I'm back in a few moments' time with some more top tips of how to do a great live stream.
If you're posting your video over onto Facebook, you might have also seen you have the ability to share it into Facebook Watch. So we'd love to know if you've had great success in terms of increasing viewers there. I have to say, shh, don't tell Facebook, but I just don't even look at Facebook Watch. I want to have content that I think is relevant for me. I follow notifications for pages and other things that I think are of interest. And I, unfortunately for Facebook, stay away from that tab, especially on my mobile device. I've got enough to be distracted with as it is anyway. And let's have a look at a couple of tools for you. So our passion here on Livestream Insiders is to bring you tools and technologies that can assist you. So I've got two for you this week in terms of a quick look at them. And the first one is going to be interesting for those of you who don't have a website. If you are just reliant on using the live streaming platform that you are using to be able to host your streams, I always recommend when I'm teaching live streaming and any other digital communications, download your content. Don't leave your content to the hands and the fate of those platforms you're on. There's all too many cases where platforms have been closed down, or in fact, we've actually, perhaps had a situation in terms of somebody's reported your content and then you can't access it. So I've seen that time and again on lots and lots of platforms. So always have your own copy of it. That's one of the reasons that we really like Blue Jeans, because we can have a high definition recording of our stream and we can repurpose it as we so wish. For example, as a podcast later on, an audio podcast, I should say. But if you don't have a website of any description, one of the tools that we looked at in 2018, I think it was now, was a platform that allows you to be able to easily capture content in terms of putting your videos into a website. And there's a free service. It's called Rivyt, R-I-V-Y-T. All the links of the resources and articles we talk about will be available after the show. And Rivyt has been a great platform, as I said, a free resource which allows you certain limitations, of course, and then there's a paid-for service which is only $50 a year. And let me tell you about some of the features. And one of the reasons that we're featuring this again is that this month, or this last month, they have made available that now, if you are using Twitch, it integrates with Twitch, and so you can have all of your chat integrate onto your own website using Rivyt. Now this is under the paid account, but also live streaming. So now what you can do is you can actually have your live streams on Twitch or on YouTube automatically go back over to your website. And that's obviously really helpful because, yes, you may want to encourage people to come to your Twitch channel or your YouTube channel, but if you just have one URL you can direct people to, then you could have other things there. For example, you could add products, you can sell your services. It allows you to also run a newsletter. You can have a custom domain, so it could be your livestream dot whatever it might be, .live, .me, .com. You can have comments and you can have live chat there. You can integrate with Google Analytics, and also for the paid account, you don't have to have the Rivyt branding. So I thought that was really interesting for those of you who don't yet have a website. One of the things that was featured, I think, in the media this last week is something that's really old news, not new news, because this has been reported on previously in terms of research that's been done to say, the most interesting career for young people these days is to be an influencer. And if you look at the money that was earned in 2018 by the top influencers and YouTubers, you can see why young people perhaps have that as an aspiration. And so even in those cases, maybe that's a good birthday gift. It's very, very, very cost effective. You don't have to worry about hosting your own website. And as I said, I think in terms of $50 is actually really, really accessible. Let's talk about another tool now, which I think you'll find helpful. You might recall a couple of weeks ago that I covered a case study of a public sector organization in the US doing a live stream and using Facebook Live for their first town hall, and their mayor had been in position, I think, in role less than 3 weeks at the time. And I talked you through what some good things were about that live stream and what we can all learn about it if you're in a public sector organization. But one of the first questions they got was about how can we make this live stream accessible. And if you watch the show or you listen to the replay of it, you'll know that I talked about, because that show was on Facebook, that Facebook did integrate with some platforms for live captioning. And that would be a paid for service that you'd actually need to use in terms of with that live captioning service. So that was released, I think we talked about that in 2017. But if you're a public sector organization and you're not yet sure that actually you're going to be using live streaming, you might be wondering about, well, what's the right service for us? But in many countries, actually having accessible content is actually essential. So I know that lots of times people will talk about having captions on recorded video, and make sure you enable captions on Facebook, and you can do so on, let's say, for example, on Vimeo, and you can do so on YouTube as well, and you can upload your captions or you can burn your captions on. And I've got lots of articles that I've talked about different tools and ways that you can caption your video content. But for live video content, it's sometimes a little more difficult. And if you're only going to a platform, let's say YouTube, you might be wondering, well, how could I caption there in terms of live, because they haven't released an integration such as Facebook has, certainly not to my knowledge at this point in time. So this is a tool that actually I came across because, in fact, I use a platform called vMix, VMIX, for live streaming. And I know that actually when I have it as a resource in terms of in my notes, people might ask a question about it. So this tool I'm going to talk to you about has got an integration you can have if you're using vMix. But if you're not using vMix, this is also how you can use this tool. The tool is called WebCaptioner. And what you can do with WebCaptioner, let's say you were at an event, you actually could have a screen, and as long as your speaker is by the mic, you need to use a Chrome browser, and what happens is it will automatically basically transcribe your content. So it's a bit like if you've used live transcriptions in Microsoft Outlook. If you've used live transcriptions in terms of when you're capturing notes, let's say on a Google Doc, you might be familiar with doing that. Well, the benefit of this is the fact there's a couple of things. One, it's got a black background, so it makes it easy to see. What I'm really interested in is also they've relatively recently introduced a font that's a dyslexic friendly font. And so I've got a daughter who's got dyslexia, so that would be of interest to her to be able to see content like that. And that could be, let's say, if somebody's speaking, it could even be a teacher could be speaking, and it could live caption the content. So what might it look like? Well, I have to say that you might need to do a little bit of customization in terms of words that it might get wrong. It's not like having a moderator behind the scenes to correct things. So you can do a little bit of personalization on the content. But in terms of me testing it for this particular show, then what you'll actually be able to see is a little example, and it depends on the platform you're using. So my video content is just in the top, and then you actually can see the content that flows thereafter. Now there's no punctuation in it, and it's pretty accurate. There were some things, there was a couple of other screenshots I won't show you because it wasn't 100% accurate, and it might have been a little bit embarrassing to put that content up on the screen. But I have certainly think that in terms of using it with Blue Jeans, it's certainly something that you could consider doing. If you had a physical event, you could actually, as I said, have the captioning come up there, so you don't have to have somebody there live transcribing at the time. And if you're using other platforms, perhaps you've got an option to have side by side in terms of the content that comes up. So I know that on one of the features I've got here on Blue Jeans, I could have had it side by side. If it was Peter on camera with the transcript, then that actually, that would have been side by side. It was because it was me, it was actually filling the whole screen there, because all I was doing was sharing a screen share. As I said, this is a free resource. The developer does invite donations, which I think you may want to consider helping them out. You need to make sure you use Chrome. You'd obviously have to go through your usual Chrome settings. If you're live stream with Chrome anyway, you'll know about how to do that in terms of making sure you've got the right microphone connected to it. You can also save a file of the transcript, which I think is pretty helpful as well. So you could actually save that and perhaps repurpose that content as an article or an ebook, even depends on how long your stream is. You can put blacklisted words in there, you can censor words, or you can make substitutions to words or phrases when you're live. As I said, when I was talking, I wasn't going to be looking to be able to do that. And in fact, because of actually using speech to text, it actually covers over 40 languages and dialects. You can also integrate it in terms of saving directly to Dropbox. So obviously you need to give your Dropbox account access to have permission from WebCaptioner. But I do hope you'll find that helpful, particularly if you're like that public service organisation who was getting requests about, we'd love to see some live captioning. It would be really nice to see other ways to integrate it. As I said, if you're using vMix, then you can actually have it in a way that the captions just appear at the bottom of the screen. It doesn't take over the full screen, just as you might have in terms of captions for your video. Sometimes I actually hard burn captions into my videos. I know that Peter would do so as well, because he's with a news organisation. We don't want to be reliant on just the captioning service, which then is down to the user. Do I turn captions on or off on whichever platform I'm on? But in terms of this, for live captioning of an event or a live stream, I think it's certainly a resource I would encourage you to add to your toolbox. And if you use vMix for live streaming, I definitely integrate it with that, because that would gives you a lot more customization, as I said, with it not filling up the full screen, although you might find that's preferential in terms of being able for people to be able to see that content. Let us know if you decide to test out WebCaptioner or other tools for live transcripts for your live streams.
It is Livestream Insiders. That's Krishna Day. I'm Peter Stewart. Thank you so much indeed for watching, whether you're watching live, as I know several people are, or whether you're watching the once live and now recorded show. But whichever way, thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your comments as well. We always appreciate those. And of course, don't forget that all of the links to the various stories and articles that we talk about this week, and indeed all of our weeks, been going for 168 weeks now, are always posted soon after the weekly show. And also, Krishna and I got a little announcement, something we've been working on behind the scenes, which we hope to bring you in the next short while. Finally, from me this week, 11 things that you need to know when you go live streaming, or perhaps before you go live streaming, something which has been published via Forbes.com. Number one on these 11 things to remember: have a great team of people working with your stream. Of course, we're talking about people who can be behind the scenes, behind the camera as well, producing, maybe in this day and age, also maybe a little bit of security as well, because of where you might be broadcasting from. People to answer the questions, people to pose questions in the text, people to put in the text stream who you are, what you're doing, why you're there, and to be welcoming and to be explaining to people what is going on. So you don't always have that continual churn of questions. What's going on here? Which you've probably seen. Those questions and comments need to be addressed, some of the more basic ones. Number two, choosing the right platform for your ideal audience. So know who your audience is, know where they're likely to be. We've talked in the recent past about the differences between different platforms such as Twitch and so on, as well as Facebook Live and Twitter. And I've given you examples in the past from my own personal broadcasting experience, the differences, the different kind of groups you get, the different audiences you get, the different congregation you get on those different platforms. So very, very briefly, you're perhaps likely to get people who are already fans and followers of yours watching on Facebook, probably more of them. But with Twitter, if you go live through Twitter or Periscope through Twitter, you're not likely to perhaps get as many, but that audience is perhaps likely to be broader because it is easier to share to other people outside one's immediate group. So do consider that. Number 3, go live when your viewers are most active. Well, that's probably going to be determined through experimentation, isn't it, to a certain extent, but also through your own personal knowledge, your own kind of gut feeling, looking at when people are likely to be most lively on your own social media channels, but also when the topic is likely to be appropriate for the people and when you want them to be watching. So, for example, if you are trying to target young mums with a live stream, you could go live during the course of the day or early evening. Early evening, really? Bath time, tea time, story time? Probably not. You probably want to consider going live later on in the evening. So just consider all these different things about when you go live. Particularly problematic, of course, if you're a worldwide brand, because of course that's going to be skewed wherever people are watching around the world in all of those different time zones. Ask yourself the very basic question: why are we doing this? What's the point of all this? And when you have worked out that you are doing it for a certain reason, think of how else you might do it. Is it just going to be a stand-up with a static tripod shot with your camera on some sticks? Or are you going to be moving around a little bit, showing people different angles, different textures? It's live streaming video. Think of the word live. Is there some element of liveness actually in what you are producing and presenting? And the video bit, so it shows something that's actually moving. If something in front of you isn't moving, then maybe you need to move yourself. Number 5, go behind the scenes. Now, we've talked about this before, and there's not much point necessarily in live streaming something at a conference which is people on stage talking, because they're going to be off mic, you're going to get a tired arm, and it's not going to be a very enjoyable or distinct or different experience. Put aside the fact that you may not have the rights to be live streaming their content. However, it does give added value both to the delegates and the people who aren't there if you're able to go up to people afterwards and do some live streams, maybe with the delegates, maybe with the speakers, and that kind of thing. So bear that in mind. I watched some live streams from a conference a couple of 3 weeks ago, which were really poor in that regard. Each one only lasted a couple of minutes. They hadn't flipped the camera, so everything was in mirror image. There were some live streams of the stage where things weren't mic'd up properly. People stopped after a random 5 minutes. It was very, very poor. I really did think, there's business here. I could offer my services for some hard cash. Number 6, don't forget to interact with your participants. Keep them engaged, keep asking them questions, keep answering their questions, whether it's on screen or off. Number 7, know what kind of moments your audience actually wants to be part of. So do decide that you're going live for a reason. And if you've got any kind of doubt about that, if in doubt, leave it out. Don't go live at all. Don't be clogging up their notifications and so on with continually going live hour after hour or day after day for no apparent obvious benefit to them, the people who are actually watching. Number 8, stay on air for at least 10 minutes so people have got a chance to find you, to actually follow you and to watch and get engaged and to know what it is you're talking about. The longer, the better. To a certain extent, I've certainly been known to go live 4 hours, then another 4 hours, then another 4 hours with something which was continually engaging content. And it did actually show that the people were watching for a good length of time. So that was the reason behind that. But don't forget, it's not the length of time, it's the actual content that you are providing people with that still has to be of value. Promote your live stream ahead of time. That's really easy to do, certainly where I work, because we've got other broadcasting channels that we can use to do that. We can actually go on the radio and say, watch this live stream, it's going to be interesting because A, B, and C. But wherever you are, take a photograph, pop it through an app on your phone, tweet that out. This is where I am. This is what I'm going to be talking about. This is when I'm going to be talking about it. Number 10, play in the sandpit. Quite a bit of experimentation, tactics, have a spreadsheet perhaps. Look at all those different variables, the time of day you went live, how long you went live for, where it was from, how well produced it was, what kind of content you delivered, what kind of reaction and questions and answers you got. Analyze what you're doing and the feedback that you get from doing it. And again, always have a purpose. I think this has come up about 2 or 3 times in this top 11 list, which means that it must be super important. Know that people want to engage, but they're only going to engage, whether that's watching in the first place or actually submitting a question, if there is something of value for them to talk about and to engage with. Remember, those notifications, ping, ping, ping on their phone, are going to make them go tap, tap, tap on their phone if they don't like it, and cross you out and unfollow you because they get fed up with all of those notifications. Here's one more notification you're going to appreciate. We're back to Krishna now with some more great content.
Thank you everybody for watching us live or on the replay. I had a great question in terms of on one of the pages that people are watching this live stream. And the question is, what about if I want to simultaneously live stream to multiple platforms? And this is what I said in the response, because this you may not see this on the page that you're watching or in terms of on the replay that you're watching at this point in time. There are a number of tools that you could use, and it depends obviously if you're on a PC or if you're on a Mac. If you're on a PC, then the platform I talked about already called vMix, you may actually want to check out them. However, do make sure that you check out the terms and conditions of the platforms that you want to live stream to, because some of them may have terms of service where they don't want you to simultaneously live stream, and that's why it's been disabled in some platforms. I actually am looking at a new tool at the moment for live streaming, and that was one of the first questions I had, which was actually, can it be simultaneously live streamed to a couple of different platforms, and that organization has not enabled it. However, there are other tools that you can use that you're not using for your actual live stream, but actually will pick up your stream and also will repurpose it. I've covered a number of those on my website. If you need a link to it, then just send me a message on whatever platform you're on, or just go over to krishna.me and you'll find a link to it. So there's some pretty inexpensive tools that you could use. Some of them are a one-off fee, and others are actually in a situation where you'd pay for it as you need it, let's say for a month at a time. So yes, there are tools, just be aware that there might be some terms of service for the platforms that you want to live stream simultaneously to. And of course, the more streams that you have, the more places that you're streaming to. Just as today, I've actually been watching 3 different places that this live stream is going to. I actually obviously have to make sure that I'm checking out the comments on those different locations. So if you're going to go simultaneously to multiple platforms, then perhaps have somebody alongside you to be able to manage that all that content coming in. In terms of those questions or comments from the audiences that you're streaming to. My last story for you is about, really, you're never too old to start live streaming. When I teach live streaming or digital marketing or social media, I often will have people say, oh, I'm just too old, I just don't get this stuff. And for me, age is no excuse. In fact, I came across a really interesting situation a little while back of a lady who's, I'm guessing she's in her 70s or 80s, I can't remember the details of it. She's in Ireland and she's got a huge Instagram following now. I think she's also done some live streams and she's become a fashionista. So basically she shares what she's wearing every day, and she's actually giving tips. In fact, I judged Digital Marketing Awards and she was actually partnered with a particular person, or sorry, a particular brand, because she was actually reaching the exact demographic that that brand wanted to. So who knew that in her retired years that actually she'd become an influencer? So it's not just the young who want to become influencers. I also know some very well-known digital experts and technology experts who are in their 60s and 70s, that they've authored books and they live stream as well. And perhaps you know other people. I actually certainly know of some others, people who are actually live streaming, and I'm guessing again they're in their 60s and 70s. But where's it really taken off by a storm? Well, a country that we've talked about previously many times, it's China. And in fact, this is an article that was in Channel News Asia, and the article is entitled "The Chinese Elderly Jump onto the Live Streaming Bandwagon." And I think this is an interesting story for us just to pick a couple of things up. And of course, you can then read the full story in the show notes, which will be linked at the end of the show. I actually have been to China. I don't know if any of you have, but it probably will be a very familiar sight that you see people exercising in terms of practicing their dance or Tai Chi or singing in the grounds of the gardens and so on, and the parks that you might walk through. And it didn't actually take too much for somebody to decide that they actually wanted to live stream it. So there's a couple of people mentioned in the article. There's a couple of age references. I have to say, when somebody says 62, 62 doesn't sound very old these days. If you think about some of the amazing celebrities and what they're looking like in their 60s, 60s is kind of the new 40s. So I guess I was expecting the article to be talking about people who are in their 80s and 90s, but no, 60s and their 70s. So it's probably not too hard for us to think about people, even in our own families or friends, who are in that age group, who perhaps are confident in terms of live streaming. Anyway, so one of the people that they feature in the article actually talked about they actually used to kind of share content, and what they decided to do in terms of actually using live streaming. She actually has 23,000 followers, and she actually asks the audience, as people do in terms of live streaming, to say, well, in her case, what song do you want to hear next? And she began it as a hobby after she'd actually heard about her nephew's teacher had shown her a singing platform for karaoke, of course, another thing that's very popular in China as well. And she goes on in the article to say, when I started live streaming, I was faced with a lot of issues that were troublesome. I was not very good at handling the technical things on the smartphone. I think all of us have got that situation now and again. I certainly turn to my children or my teenagers in terms of different things that they're actually checking out in terms of on their devices, because sometimes they've got to grips with things faster than I have. And she finds it as an outlet to be able to express herself, and she now spends 2 hours every other day of the week singing and performing live. And she obviously then gets virtual gifts, which she can then redeem as cash. So it's a nice little way for her to boost her pension, I guess to say. And then somebody else that was also referenced in the article said they actually are using it as a way to actually try new things every day, new tricks that they can use to attract and entertain everyone. And I thought, isn't that a great thing? In fact, in this particular case, they're talking about people singing, or they're talking about people dancing, and perhaps you're not that active in terms of dancing, but perhaps you play a musical instrument, and it's a great way to reach people, and also that community. I know there's a lot of things that are going on in the media at the minute in the UK, who actually is talking about, should we actually have smartphones at school at all? And there's been a huge debate about it, and there's been some pros and cons. Not all technology is evil, not all smartphones are evil, not all live streams are evil. There's certainly good to be had of all of them, and I certainly think there's an opportunity there in terms of that, kind of finding a new audience, finding new people to talk to and connect with, and stopping that sense of isolation. And what really struck me was that part of the article where it said, I'm constantly thinking of new things to do every day. I know that sometimes if people are a little older, perhaps they're a little bit more isolated. They don't perhaps have people around them. They may not be working. They may not have a part-time job, or they may not have stayed on working for a long time. Increasingly, we see people in their 70s and beyond who are, don't want to give up work. I just think, isn't this a great way to actually keep our brains active? And, if it makes us look to try new things. I know because of the work that I do, every single day I learn something new. I'm actually learning more actively as a lifelong learner now than I ever imagined I would do when I actually just left college. Now, there are some people who actually, who don't agree with these elderly ladies in terms of live streaming, and say that you shouldn't be doing it at such an old age. And perhaps, you may not want or appreciate elderly relatives doing it if they're going to show themselves up because you don't want them to embarrass themselves. But the article kind of finishes off by saying the young people say they can't live without the internet, but really it's the same for the older generation. I think it's the same for all generations. Some of us will love the internet and what it can bring for us. Some of us dislike the internet and like to make sure we're switched off and disabled and not on any social platforms. But I think it's finding the right thing for each one of us. But I hope that inspires you. If you think that you're too old to start live streaming, perhaps that story will give you some encouragement in terms of, again, turning to China in terms of where live streaming is big. And in that particular case, it's karaoke that they love to do. And I think it's a great way to actually, keep that community and integration and conversations going, and a lovely way for people to actually think and keep their brains active as well. I hope you like that story. As I said, a little story from a few seas away from us.
Absolutely, yes. And who doesn't like a bit of singing, a little bit of dancing? I'm a veritable travelling minstrel of a weekend. I'm there with my lute and singing and dancing all the way. Krishna, thank you for that, bringing us those stories. Some terrific apps that Krishna was telling us about. I'm really intrigued by that transcription app, which is available. So many different abilities and facilities that it's got, so many different functions. And also another story from China where, of course, live streaming always goes down a storm, and we've got some really, really interesting case studies over the course of the last 168 episodes. Plus, from me, we talked about Facebook Watch a little bit earlier on as well, and also those 11 top tips of how to create and produce and present a fantastic live stream that's going to be doing it for you and your business and your brand. We are back in another 7 days with more from Livestream Insiders, the tips and the tech, and also the changes to various platforms, and also some fantastic user case studies, and also some apps as well. We find out all these stories, we collate them all together, not only bringing them to you here on Livestream Insiders on what is a Sunday evening here in the UK, but also we collate those links for you and we post them as well, so you can go back and refer to those articles and use them yourself. And also in the next few days, we hope to be bringing you a special big announcement from Krishna and I. So keep watching our social media for that, at Krishna Day, at Twitter Stuart. We'll see you in another 7 days for another episode of Livestream Insiders. Bye-bye for now.